Hey guys, it's Mike Urban. We're back with another episode. I'm sitting here with Patrick Barrett. He's an everything man. He's an attorney, he's a developer, and I'm happy he's sitting here today because I think you're going to want to hear what he has to say. Pat, thanks for being on.
Well, thank you for having me. I am all those things, but I'm also more. I'm active in the community in Cambridge. I'm active now as a Mainer, which is kind of interesting. But more excitingly, I'm interested in taking on inclusionary zoning in the city of Cambridge with a rusty knife. And I say that politely, somewhat. But I've been developing in Cambridge for over 25 years. I have been an attorney for about 10 years, which came about as a result of frustration dealing with my own projects in Brookline, Boston, and Cambridge, and I felt like I kind of needed those stripes on my shoulder to proceed with my profession. An unnecessary, unfortunate occupational hazard, but I try to be many things.
Yeah. So obviously, the inclusionary zoning is a big topic throughout most of these cities, Boston included. Do you want to explain to everybody that's watching what it is exactly?
Well, absolutely, and I'm grateful that my really good friend Ezra Klein wrote a book about it. Just kidding, he's not my friend, he's a man who wrote a book. But inclusionary zoning is a set-aside or an exaction from the municipality that takes a portion of your building, residential building, and designates it affordable. So in the city of Cambridge, for instance, if you build 10,000 square feet or 10 units of housing, the city takes 20% of your building and designates as affordable based on different AMI levels. I think in Cambridge for rental, it's like 80%. And for home ownership, it goes to up to 100. But like all municipalities, there's an intricate web of inferno-like hoops that could screw that up and makes the numbers lower. Or, it's a regulatory mess in terms of how it's administered.
And how does that affect you as a developer when you have to, you're trying to make things, everybody wants things that are more affordable, right? But I think that what a lot of people don't understand is that when you're trying to always include affordable units, and when it's at such a high percentage of 20%, what happens to the market rate units?
Well, I just sort of break it down simply. Have you ever started a business where the government took 20% of it off the top and made it successful? So I don't think that's possible.
Yeah.
I've owned restaurants in the past. I've owned businesses. I own some businesses now. If the government came in today and took 20% of my revenue, I would have a problem. But what happens in development is that loss is displaced in the project onto the market rate units. So in order to get a project approved, I have to go through a series of pro formas and financial regulations to get banks and capital markets to all invest in my project. They all demand a certain return and a certain economic threshold because despite what people would have you believe, construction is very risky. Have you seen the guys who do it? They're not surgeons. They're not rocket scientists, and a lot can go wrong on any project, even in the most perfect conditions. So they have to embed that risk into their project, and the only way they can do it is financially. So for instance, in Cambridge, if I'm selling my affordable units at the price of $275 a foot, which is roughly where it is, it gets a little bit lower, sometimes a little bit higher, but it depends on the unit size. So let's say stick with $275. My market units are then calculated around $1,000 to $1,200 a foot. I need to take that loss, which is the delta between the $1,000 a foot and the $275, and push it into the market units, or my project won't pencil. I have to find that 20% somewhere. Mm-hmm. So that 20% gets displaced into the other market side, which means as a consumer, you're paying for the unit that someone else is moving into.
Right. They're basically being subsidized by the people that are buying the market rate units, essentially. Right.
That's the only way. I'm not subsidizing them.
Right. You're not subsidizing them. That's a big misconception I think a lot of people have, especially in, of course, Eastern Massachusetts, where everything is expensive. And let's ask this question. So how could we circumvent these affordable units so that builders could just build affordable, not necessarily affordable, but let's say fair-priced market rate units across the board? What can be done to circumvent this issue?
Well, sir, first of all, you kind of have to find religion a little bit, because I think this has become such a weird issue where, like, you can have Harvard professors show up at a hearing and say the laws of supply and demand somehow don't work in Cambridge. That we could build 1 million units of housing and it would still be just as expensive as it is today, which is nonsense. We had the pandemic was awful, unequivocally awful, but it did show us something about supply and demand economics in real time. The vacancy rate went way high. Apartments were all of a sudden vacant in the city and costs were lower. Supply, demand, real, and even in Cambridge. So like once you can accept that reality, there's lots of things you can do. You can subsidize the affordable component by having the city pay for it. You can lower the threshold or scale it in ways that, right now we look at a 5-unit project or 10-unit project the same way we look at a 1,000-unit project. That's just dumb. We hire consultants to reverse engineer back to conditions to make our reports look good. Stop doing that. Right now Cambridge uses the same consultant for every single thing. And if you look at his work, sorry, Carl, it's terrible. It says my land cost is the same for a 10-unit building as a 1,000-unit building, as a 50-unit building. It's just nonsense. So like, I have no problem with building affordable housing. Although I think ideologically for me, I have a problem with making other people pay for it. I really have a problem with making the consumer pay for it, because in Cambridge right now, you can't buy a single family house. You need like $2.5 million to do it. If you want to buy something and own a piece of the rock, which I firmly still believe in, you need to buy like a condo, or maybe you buy a total disaster of a building and try to rebuild it. But there's few and far between opportunities for that. And most people don't do what I do. So a condo is the way. That's your affordable housing for everybody else. And I think the way that we look at it, the way we talk about it, developers are evil. Nothing is really affordable unless it's subsidized. Right now, the price point of $800,000 to $1.5 million, which is a lot of money, that's where your affordable market is in Cambridge, if you can find it. Those units go very, very fast. You can lower that by building a lot more, but you have to want to really do that.
And that's the issue. So a lot of people, even people that watch my channel, a lot of people are disillusioned that thinks that they try to make this a more complicated issue than it is, and that is the supply and demand issue. Yeah. And they try to use these creative words and this and this and this and try to reference whatever, but it's always a supply and demand issue. I've been doing this for 10 years. You've been doing this for over 20 years, right? And if the market was flooded, like you said earlier, with like 1 million units, of course, not every, what's going to happen is the supply is going to outpace the demand of said units. So the fact of the matter here is this makes it even more difficult to get financing, right? So when you bring these projects to a bank or investors or whatever, you're trying to save and scrape together something to where you could make this actually work so that they could even finance your projects, correct?
It's the project equivalent of trying to accomplish any goal with one arm tied behind your back.
Right.
So you're really you're going to the table with 80% of your cards, 80% of your value, and trying to make it work as if it were the full project. So that capital has to come from somewhere. And the problem is, Cambridge, like Boston, fine-tuned their ordinances for the most economically advantageous moment in our history. We'll tell our grandchildren about 3% loans. That world is gone. The world of building lots and lots of lab to subsidize our projects, gone. So if you look at the history of Cambridge's inclusionary ordinance, which began in 1998, it was voluntary before that. Guess how many people volunteered? 0. And then up until 2016, when they made the jump, they showed 20 projects from the jump from 2016 to 2025. Of those projects, 90% of them are subsidized by lab development, or they weren't even 20% at all. So they knew it kind of didn't work back then. But it's going back to my larger point about being kind of like a religious moment. It's politics, only politics, because developers are going with their books open. It's math. If you can get me to the place where I can get a return, we're good. But they're not willing to do that. And I think the people commenting the comments are always kind of the same. It's a give me to developers. Like frickin' Moses came down from the mountain with tablets of zoning and said, thou shalt not change this. Zoning is this box we made for ourselves. It's nonsense. It literally is nonsense. Yeah, Euclidean zoning keeps our rendering plants away from our orphanages. Demonstrably a good idea. But we're past that. Now all zoning does, it makes it so the very aggressive planning board adjacent boomer can show up every single time, say character of the neighborhood, infrastructure, too many kids in our schools, noise, the trees, the trees, and block whatever they want to block. Half our zoning code in Cambridge was written simply to block the other guy from doing the thing they did before. I rewrote the ADU ordinance in 2014 for Cambridge. I did it in full disclosure. I wanted to build my house a smart way, and I didn't want Cambridge to stop me with stupid laws. I got a 7-2 vote, and we were able to pass it to exempt gross floor area for basements and also allow for ADUs throughout the city. Prior to that, ADUs were only allowed in houses that were 3,500 square feet on a half-acre lot. Those were houses for the frickin' help, and Cambridge codified that. That's where their zoning comes from. Mm-hmm. I explained it to a city councilor like as dumb as I could possibly do it. Zoning code is like a book about you. If I'm from frickin' Mars and I come down here, I want to know what you value. I look at this book, and whatever the book tells me to build based on the financial conditions of the time is what you want. And right now it tells me to build labs and single family houses. Is that you? You tell me it's not. But that's as simple as I can make it. Mm-hmm. And I build things for a living and I make money doing that. I don't feel guilty about that. Mm-hmm. Should I?
No, I don't think so.
But I think that's it's a weird, ideological thing. I just don't understand. I'm grateful that Ezra Klein wrote his book. I'm not, full disclosure, I'm not a liberal. I'm not a conservative either. But politically abandoned is more like it. But I think, I don't see it any other way in terms of if you want to address a problem, there's a way to do it. But to tie yourself in knots over it and process and nonsense, I think Cambridge wakes up in the morning and they have meetings and they put together this beautiful ordinance. Nothing can actually get done, but God damn, we did it, guys. We created the perfect threaded needle of equity and perfection that won't get anything done, but that was the action. We did it.
So basically, to sum it up, it sounds like they created a problem and they put it in the developer's hand in order to try to solve it.
100%.
Right? So how does that, when you're starting a project or you have an idea for a project, let's say, normally, how long does it take to, now given what you build, right?
Yeah.
How long does it take to actually get from getting let's just say getting building permits to actually making the structure? How long does this actually take?
Full disclosure, I'm really freaking good at what I do. So it takes me a little bit less time, but the average time for projects from start to finish for what's called an Article 19 project, which is 25,000 or bigger, would take you about 18 months just in the planning process. And what they really get you is in the application. You have an application that has a suite of things you're supposed to follow. Green building regulations, green roof regulations, specialized stretch code regulations, bicycles, DPW, arborists, partridge in a pear tree. Each one of those is like a 20-person meeting for a couple months. You have to put together a scope of work. They have to agree to that scope of work. And then, that negotiation takes time. So by the time you actually have an application that can be ready to be filed, that's like a 9-month discussion. And then after that, you go through the process of actually putting the construction plans, permitting. All that takes months and months and months. I think on average for a small project, it'll take you about 18 months from start to finish to get the approvals. Bigger project, about 3 years.
Wow. So do you think that if they were, obviously they created the red tape for whatever reason they created the red tape, right? Do you think that if they were to ease up on that red tape, this would allow for more developers and builders to be able to do things at scale? Because if people are waiting 3 years to actually build something, how could you, look at it this way. The more red tape this is my opinion, but the more red tape that you create, okay, wouldn't that somewhat have developers and builders not want to build in a certain area and take their money elsewhere instead of, let's say making it easier to get from point A to point B and maybe not necessarily flooding the market, because I also know that's, I'm thinking about your profit and so on and so forth here. But how could you possibly create an affordable environment when it takes so long to get one building through? It's not possible.
Which is why only a few people do it. So, in Cambridge especially, the threshold for the ability to even get a project done is a whole different, another skill set. It's why people like me can go from being a developer to being an attorney interchangeably, because I think there's only like 3 people in the city that have my skill set. It is not for, I think a wise man once told me that it's a full contact sport. So, and what he meant by that was you are going to, there's no plan that you can start that's going to go perfectly. No plan survives execution. So you're going to run into lots of hurdles, but if you know what they are, you're able to get projects done. I think in the past, it was easier to do because lots of these bigger projects were reliant on commercial development to subsidize the residential development in a way that I don't think people really understood how much money was involved. Now that money's gone. So, I feel kind of like it's my moment. I'm sitting here in the corner being like, hey, I've been here all along trying to do something, and now you need me. You need lots of me's, building middle income housing throughout the city, infill housing, where you blocked us before. At least if you have any expectation of achieving your goal. I think reason why people like me still try is I've been living in Cambridge for 20 years. It was not my intention to do that, but I'm a team player and I pick my teams. Cambridge is my team. So like for better or for worse, most of the times, it's the other way, but I still believe in that market. I still believe in MIT and Harvard, and I believe that it is the epicenter for the future. We don't strut that out. Instead, we have a bunch of pretentious Harvard professors running around talking about how they understand planning, but we have ways to solve these problems. And the regulatory red tape, it's just a matter of pulling back and saying, what is your goals? What do you want? You want housing. Great. Build housing. What do you need to do that? Well, Article 19, blow it up. It does absolutely nothing for nobody. It takes me forever. Or turn it into a bunch of boxes checked. You care about green roofs. Okay, why? Explain it to me. Right now, the way the green roofs is drafted, I got to make a portion of my roof a lawn. Why? Why am I making a portion of my roof a lawn? So somebody can walk up there with their little dog they can put in a pocketbook and have it go to the bathroom. Like that, I mean, that's what the real estate agents tell me. Oh yeah, you should make this little garden space. I'm like, that's disgusting. I don't want to do that. But also, like, we live in New England, like maybe if we go close to the equator, we can start talking about turning our places into a tree, but not in New England. But solar is a good option. So let's look at that. Two groups of people I despise the most: the utilities and the cable company. If I could find ways to remove those people from my lives, I would do this. So most of my projects, I add solar because I freaking hate Eversource. You heard me. Eversource gas, you're cool, but like you're being phased out, and it's another bigger issue in terms of like the electrification of all projects. Cambridge went down this path to regulate buildings for they're part of the pilot program to move all gas fixtures. Well, that's great. What's my alternative? Well, I'm all electric, but all those electric retrofits require massive transformers. Where do they go? Cambridge is like a 0 lot line city. So just imagine taking a building that's next to another building where your walls are the same wall as the next door neighbor and saying, I got to put in a school bus somewhere in this building that's going to power your building. Now you can't use gas. That to my mind, some people say I oversimplify things, and I do that because like the problems are actually not like, I'm not putting people on the moon, and I'm not doing the crazy stuff they do at MIT or Harvard. I'm just like building things. Mm-hmm. It's like Legos. So like, where does that Lego go? It really is that simple. Like in terms of talking about the electrification of buildings, the transformer location is the most complicated, most lengthy process there is with Eversource, and they always oversize it, and you're like, okay, it is the size of an SUV. Where does it go? It has head height clearances. It has door egresses requirements. It's 6 foot clear. It's 15 foot high. I mean, just imagine that box in your mind in terms of like what you need to build in order to build the rest of your building. Right.
And then what the costs involved with that? So like obviously the entire state is pushing this electrification, right? Yep. So you have 20% of affordable units. You have to, let's say, offset that with your, let's say, market rate units. Right. Now you also have all of these other electrification mandates that are coming into play to build, to just get your building started. How much is that adding to the cost to build?
It depends on the scale of the project, but it ranges from about 20 to 40% based on based on the size of the building, how many units, and what regulations you have to comply with. So the full electrification, even net zero, like you can get some of those costs down to like roughly, 5%, 6% outer shell of building. But what gets sort of in the weeds is if you're doing a retrofit of an existing building, way more expensive now than it ever was before. In fact, I would say that taking an existing building and trying to convert it is the most expensive project you can do. It'd be much cheaper in all cases to just level the building and start again. But that opens up a whole nother bag of cats in terms of historical review.
Right.
Charlie Sullivan's great in Cambridge. I love you, baby. But it's tough because it adds a level of uncertainty. If I want to go to the bank and I say, here's the project. Okay, well, talk to me when they bless this and allow you to knock that building down. Cambridge added 12 months to their demolition delay. In Cambridge, everything that's 50 years or older is default historic, which means you have to go to the czar of historical, Charlie, who's usually pretty amicable, but it's a process. And if he likes the building, you're there for 12 months, bare minimum. Or they come back and do a landmarking. I have a project in a historical conservation district, which is like another layer of nightmares. But they're a historical conservation district is like having a default landmarking for the entire district. So everything goes through layers of scrutiny. I could show you the materials that I'm going to use down to where did it come from? Where was it sourced? We have embodied carbon regulations in Cambridge too now. So if I do new construction, I have to show you where my steel is sourced, where my screws were made, where all this nonsense that I'm like, where does this information go? I feel like there's a vault, Indiana Jones style, where they just push it yes, this is where the embodied carbon metrics go. And you're like, no one did this 2 days ago, but today this matters. Okay, and I don't necessarily not believe in doing things in a more environmental way, but it also has to make sense.
Right.
I think when I was a baby, they put 5 cents and 10 cents on cans, and all of a sudden I really wanted to recycle because 10 cents in I won't say when 1983 was 10 cents. I get at least 10 goldfish for that. Now I'm honestly, there's not as much value and there's not much return. So you're asking for a lot, and you're getting even less, and then you add these other sort of layers on there where a lot of it feels performative. It's like the lawn on top of my building. I am hardwired to find loopholes. So there's a loophole in that. I can make my lawn like a 10 by 10 square. I still have to build the lawn, but it still satisfies the requirement. Now, why am I doing that? The cost to go build that lawn, you're paying for, not me. You can brag to your friends that you can bring your little pocketbook dog up there and then go to the bathroom, but I don't know, is that a brag? It doesn't feel like one. But it's also not solving any climate change issue. Globally speaking, we are a participant in the planet, and if you're trying to solve for climate change, doing it in Cambridge by itself is probably not going to do too much. I don't think other municipalities are looking at us going, wow, Cambridge did something really stupid. We should definitely do that. In fact, I think it's just the opposite. We've been following a lot of other places like San Francisco and inclusionary, for instance. They pulled back. It's one of the bright lights in my memo I issued to the city 2 weeks ago saying we can be done. If they could find the political will to make the realization that it killed their housing market, so can we. The problem with Cambridge is they are still kind of stuck in this mode where the phony baloney data they've been feeding themselves for the past decade, they have not yet come to terms with the fact that it is in fact nonsense.
So in San Francisco, you're saying that they pulled back on the affordable?
Yeah.
By how much?
They were at 25%, and now it's 12.5% and 15%. I think it might go back up to 20% for certain types of projects. Yeah. But to my mind, I see San Francisco as the North Star of progressive liberalism, and whatever they're doing must be awesome, quote unquote. So if they can actually find the will to do that, or at least recognize that there's a problem, then we should be able to do the same. I think the problem is if we want to be a data-driven society, the data has to also be accurate and clear. Right now, the way Cambridge measures inclusionary zoning isn't really clear. What is an inclusionary unit? How was it built? Under what section of the ordinance was it built? They lump it all together in the reports, which is why they show cumulative growth for inclusionary units on their graphs. Well, that's fun because you don't have to really show what you're actually building. You used to show it's going up, so it must be great. Mm-hmm. When in reality, the tallest bar on their graph in 2024, they actually netted 0 inclusionary units as it's defined, because they're counting a 37-story building in Kendall Square that was the subject of multiple concessions over a decade and a half, including a substation placement, which is the most expensive substation Eversource ever built. I guess that's a brag somehow. and a 3-unit project that I have to be general counsel on, which I'm like, we're not even in the building permit stage yet. We're a hole in the ground. So those are what they're counting as inclusionary units. And if you're the counsel and you're like, I don't know, yesterday you were an insurance salesperson or a homemaker or a doctor, like you don't know any of this stuff. You're relying on these people to tell you what it is. And you've got no reason to believe the evil developer because I'm terrible, right? Capitalism is bad and blah, blah, blah. But that's why I'm pushing to have them show their own data, because I win this argument hands down without even lifting a finger. Show me what you've got in terms of your data. And their actual data shows a pattern of nonsense, that since they jumped it up to 20%, only I think 6 out of the 20 projects were built at that level. Of those 6, 2 may be naturally occurring. But the rest of them all have asterisks on them, just like Jose Canseco. But like, no offense. But like, it's just, if I'm giving you this nonsense and you're a politician, you don't want to touch it. It works, Patrick. Look at it, the numbers, the graph, we're done. And like, you actually look with your eyes, look what's being built. There's no mass housing being built in Cambridge right now. There's small projects, and since they made the jump in the multifamily housing, which has been great, they've sort of adopted a form-based zoning regulation for the city of Cambridge. Kudos, nice job, Burhan. But like, if inclusionary is still there, it's a bottleneck for everything else. So like, I can go to 9,999 square feet. And I bet you if we walk down to ISD right now and try to see what the permits have been pulled for the past 3 months, every single one, I bet you, I would put a whole dollar on it. That are all at that threshold because they're not inclusionary. They don't have to give away 20% of their building. And it's quite clear that, especially in the smaller threshold, inclusionary kills projects, which is why, I've been pushing on this, and which is also why I've been, putting together the basis of a lawsuit. I think that the time has come for developers, especially in the middle rung, to step up and to fight. And it's not about, anything other than what's right and wrong. And I think that the city taking my building, 20% of my building, and not giving me any bonuses, not giving me anything for that, is absolutely a taking. And I think case law is catching up with me. I think one attorney gave me a 5% chance of success, which I was like, that's great. I put it at like 3. But it needs to be highlighted because Cambridge has also been lazy. They have requirement to do what's called a nexus study to show proportionality, to show that there's a basis for all this. And right now their nexus study says the more housing I build, the more expensive it becomes. That's their basis for doing all of this. Going back to our supply and demand conversation, I think I can demonstrably prove that that's not true. Yeah. So what is my actual impact? They're also supposed to show site impact. If I'm building housing, I have 2 projects right now where we're building housing where there used to be no housing at all. What's my impact on housing on that site? As far as I'm concerned, it's 0. If I have another project where I might be knocking down 20 units and building another 90. I guess shame on me for knocking down existing housing. I don't really feel bad about it, but also I'm replacing it with 70 units. You can say, well, those units can be more expensive. Maybe, but not really that much more. Right now, I'm getting $5 to $5.25 a foot for rent for existing residential property in Cambridge. That is bonkers. Those are the numbers that like the high-rise guys used to brag about. I'm like, no, you're not getting $5. There's no way. Now they're getting 7. So, we've got 40 years of policy that have led us to this moment, all driven by the same crazy boomers that are showing up at planning board meetings saying like, character of the neighborhood. They've only made it more expensive and made it absolutely impossible for anyone who's 20, 30 to live in the city outside of being under a rent or some other thing. We live 5 dudes in a basement kind of living. But like, there's no pathway. There's no future there. Yeah. You're not going to, if we're going to dig it out, if we're going to try to dig ourselves out based on this inclusionary zoning, it's going to take 100 years or more to get to that place they want to get to. There's no way to do it other than to deregulate and make the housing that I build today is the affordable housing of 30 years from now. Mm-hmm. So, and if I build enough of it, which we will, I mean, look at labs. Those crazy bastards built millions of square feet. Now they're kind of screwed. Mm-hmm. I would love for the day when I come and say, crap, I'm screwed. But that's going to take a long time. But it's also like, it's the right thing to do. And I want my kids to be able to live in Cambridge someday if they want to. Although my daughter, ever since we moved out, is like, I'm in the country, Dad, sorry. I'm like, don't be sorry to me. But like, What future are we offering anybody? If we don't do something?
That's my point. Is like, look at what the costs are now. Imagine what they're going to be another 5, 10, 15, or 20 years from today. Like if I grew up in Cambridge and I had kids and we had a house in Cambridge, I know that by the time that they're, have a career or whatever, there's no way they're going to be able. I mean, the same could be said for Boston too, right? So, like, I think you probably know this. Michelle just, I think within the last year or so, she raised.
You're on a first name basis?
Yeah. First name basis. Nice. So Michelle Wu, she raised the affordable unit threshold recently, didn't she?
Yep.
Is it, what is it now, like 16 or 18%?
So 17%, and then there's a 3% Section 8 kicker.
So like what, I mean, to your point, you figure that they have to be working off of some data that shows some sort of projection that in the future that this will be a good thing and potentially be on the right side of history. But it hasn't been. We haven't been on that. We haven't been on that journey.
So there's a policy order May 12th at City Council that myself and some councilors worked on. Patty Nolan and Paul Toner, thank you for your support. And it requires the manager to go and take a look at this. One of the letters of support we got for that was from one of the Board of Zoning Advisors in Boston, who was responsible for the increase from 17, from where they were before to the 20% they are now, writing in his letter that he deeply regrets the decision he made because it's created, in his words, an anemic situation in Boston where no housing is being built. So here we have a guy from the actual board. I'm not going to throw him under the bus, but it's a letter, it's public, you can read it, where he says the decision he made was the wrong decision. He cautioned Cambridge from proceeding any further. You have, the example of San Francisco. We also have other examples across the country where they're looking at this saying, we're not building any housing under this rule, and the housing we are building is less and less and less. A couple of councilors, I think Mark McGovern and Burhan Azim, brought something called the Affordable Housing Overlay to Cambridge that deregulates the entire process for affordable housing developers. And they're building like gangbusters. There's lots of projects. I actually think their affordable housing overlay for affordability will well outpace what inclusionary has done in only a short amount of time. So there are other solutions to building affordable housing. And I think where Cambridge runs into the ground is there's a real sense that the number they arrived at is arbitrary, 20%. Where does it come from? I don't even understand it. And there's a real sense that it's done to punish developers, not really to build housing. Because I remember when they made the change, people were jumping up and down saying that no, we shouldn't do this. But the people who are the most supportive of this were the same people who show up at the planning board meetings and say, character of the neighborhood, the trees, and too many kids in our schools, and I don't like cars, but I live in the city for some reason. I don't like noise, but again, I live in the city for some reason. And I call them the Manchester by the Charles people, because I told one woman I was being not that polite, but I said, I'm from Marblehead. I'm like, you would love Marblehead. They don't change anything. It's historical. There's lots of other social issues they have that you also might strangely enjoy. But let me take you there and leave you there because that's where you belong. And you'll find a house and nothing will ever change. It'll be great. But, here you live in the land of Harvard and MIT. You live in the land of innovation and tech. And there's things happening in Cambridge right now that are going to save the world. Fact. How could you possibly think that this is a place we're going to stop the future? And that future is housing. We need to build houses for these people who want to come here. Our lab section is faltering because, in part, we have no places to put people. And when those people come to live and work in these spaces, they're going to want housing. They're going to take your house. They're going to take the house over there that was built in 150 years ago. That's essentially made out of garbage. No offense to old houses, but they're on fieldstone foundations. Hello. And they're going to knock them down, buy them out for prices you can't possibly afford. And that's what jacks up all the prices. Everything that the city has done to date has increased the cost of housing. It has never gone down. They keep saying, well, we'll do this, we'll do this. They create market distortions that squeeze the capital in different directions and just make things more expensive. There's the result. I don't need, it's not theoretical. This is what has happened. Everyone still sort of laments the loss of rent control. There's that rent control shaped hole in everybody's heart they're trying to fill. That inclusionary zoning is the way they did it. It's a price control. I mean, there's a case in 2020 where a developer actually fought the city on the issue and had to settle because, I think he hit a nerve and wound up getting out of Dodge for like 250 grand, which he was happy to do. But like, it is not a housing policy.
You know what? You brought up a really good point. So if the lab spaces can't be filled by people because they can't afford to live in the city of Cambridge, and then they go and turn around and let's say there's a single family dilapidated, they buy it for what, $2.5 million, right?
Yeah.
And then they either tear it down or redevelop it or whatever, they're, in one hand, it's good, but in the other hand, it's bad because they're increasing the value of potential properties that are comparable to that, right? Let's just call it what it is.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, they're also simultaneously making it less affordable for people of the future, right?
Yeah.
And that's my problem when it comes to these affordable units. And the other portion of this, and you kind of touched on this too. So when Cambridge decided, what was this, maybe a year ago, when they decided to take their single family zoning and allow multifamily units, right? They allowed something like that, right?
So
up to 6 units or something?
In February of this year, they adopted what's called their multifamily housing zoning.
Yes.
Which is the sort of form-based zoning. They got rid of lot per dwelling unit calculations. They got rid of FAR for residential builds. They removed most of the setbacks or limited them to 5 feet or 10 feet in the front.
Yep.
So a massive liberalization of zoning, but bottlenecked by inclusionary.
Right. But the problem is, I did a video on this, and I would say the comments were completely mixed because we had people coming in from Cambridge that live in a single family house and they're, it's like the NIMBYism thing, right? You know what I'm saying? So, but it's funny because the same people that complain about taxes and their town, has to, file for an override and all of these things on one end, they also don't want new development. Yeah. They don't want multifamily homes. Yeah. They don't want more tax revenue because, they want to look at the trees across the street. And listen, I understand to a point, right? Like I could get it to a point, but you can't simultaneously be complaining that your kids or their kids can't afford a place to live in the town that they grew up, right?
Right. And on the tax issue, the piper has come on that as well because Cambridge got a 14% reduction in the commercial taxes this last quarter. So, or this last fiscal. We see that in our revenues for the business improvement district, which are dropping. So 14% is, in my mind, a disaster. But that revenue has to now come from residential. So whatever's happened in Boston in terms of, Michelle's issue with, commercial raising the rates, that's going to come to Cambridge too. It's just coming a little bit slower because we had more of a shield around ourselves with our lab community and our heavy commercial development, and we're really small. Yeah. Cambridge is only like 6.3 square miles, but we have $1 billion budget. Boston's like 80 square miles and has a $6 billion budget in that range. So like scale-wise, it's way out of whack. But the problem with the zoning change that they made is those same NIMBYs who are upset about more housing, they're going to go now build an observatory in their backyard because they can. They're now going to build that addition they've always wanted. That's going to be like 6,000. They take their 2,000 square foot house and make it a 6,000 square foot house. Happy day for them. Which honestly, maybe I get a little libertarian sometimes when I talk about property. Do what you want. But as a housing policy, don't tell me you can build a 6,000 square foot house, but I can't build a 6,000 square foot apartment building. I mean, no. And in terms of a policy in general, like if you are in a city where that is allowed, going back to like, I'm the guy from Mars looking at your zoning ordinance, you're now telling me that you're fine with me building 9 units for multifamily housing, but 10? Nuh-uh. I need 20% of your building for that. Okay, that's a weird message. It is the largest tax on development in the city by a mile. We tax commercial development with something called linkage. It's another BS thing that we made up a while ago saying, we can steal money from commercial developers. I care less about them, but I still think it's nonsense. But that rate is $33.34 a foot. So for my 100,000 square foot building, I'm giving you a check for $3.3 million. Big deal. I'm building a 100,000 square foot lab 4 years ago, and it worked out. But if I build that same house, a 500,000 square foot residential building, I'm giving you 20% of my building at a sale price of say $1,000 a foot. $20 million tax on my building. Not to mention the soft cost, the cost of waiting, all the application stuff, right. The 3 years of my life. Like, give me a freaking break. And what message is that for housing? If I'm taxing housing higher than any other thing in the city, do I actually want housing? I think the answer is no, which also is a fine message to say. You can say Cambridge is closed for business, but say it. Don't tell me we need 12,500 units by 2030 when you're building at a rate that wouldn't get you there for 600 years. Just say you don't want housing. End of story.
Maher Healey plans on building 20,000 houses starting next year per year.
Per year?
Yeah.
Godspeed.
Yeah.
Is she building that like in Minecraft?
I think so. Yes. I think that was the, yes, that's going to be, yes. Yeah. I think the entire state of Massachusetts builds around 11,000, if I'm not mistaken, per year. Right.
That sounds about right. But I think like when you have ambitious goals like that, but you don't do anything about the regulatory framework for it, like the MBTA Community Act is a little bit of smoke and mirrors. So Cambridge is a certified MBTA Community Act community because of course we are. But if you look at the economic feasibility assessment that we gave to the state to get certified, it's written in crayon. It's written by, again, a consultant who I won't name, but like a consultant we always use that gives us the right answer, if you know what I'm saying. You know, using metrics like, construction cost of $350 a foot, no parking, debt service, 5 to 6% in this environment, and equity positions of over 50% in projects, which is like, it's just fantasy land.
Yes.
But the state looked at that and said, you know what? Thumbs up. Clearly it works. I think that's the benefit of where I am right now, because I've been doing this for a long time. I am comfortable in my position in Cambridge, and they've done such a poor job of putting the data together that I don't really have to be that smart to point out the errors. And I'm not. I think I advertise myself as Cambridge's only C student, but like they are clearly juicing the numbers, not only on the production side, but on the economic feasibility assessment they use to get there. So all you need to do is point that out. If you're comfortable with those results and comfortable with that level of hypocrisy, I'm really glad I live in Maine now, but like, don't tell me you need housing. Just say this, tell me the truth. Tell me it is, rebrand Cambridge Manchester by the Charles. Do it. You'll get a lot of boomers. They'll be psyched. But like, I think for everyone else, they'll get them, at least if you're a 20-year-old, I feel bad for those people. I feel bad for 20-year-olds and 30-year-olds who go to these meetings, who listen to the council, who vote, who are like super progressive and have signs and stuff and like get all excited and, like they're working they think I'm the bad guy. And I'm like, dude, I'm the best friend you ever freaking had. And like that guy right there, he's lying to you. He's been lying to you for a long time, but the lie is so good. The lie is so perfect. You want to believe it because being progressive is better than getting results.
You put that. That's very well put. You talked about the MBTA Communities Act. Somebody called me on Monday, on Memorial Day, actually, about this. How many units is Cambridge? How many units does Cambridge do they have to build?
12,500 by 2030.
Oh, that's what it is?
Yeah.
That's never going to happen. That's never going to happen.
By my watch, it's 2025. If I started today, I wouldn't have one project ready to go until 2028.
How do they determine, do you know quite a bit about this? Like, how do they determine what developer, like this is a bid project, right? Mm-hmm. Is that how it works? Like a closed bid, like if you want to build something that's part of this MBTA Communities Act, are they giving is there any mandated money for this?
No.
None.
Zero.
So like, they started this as a mandate, right?
It's a mandate.
It's an unfunded mandate.
It's an unfunded mandate, yeah. I guess you could argue that there are sort of affordable housing funds out there that you can grab onto in areas that would allow you to do the type of building that you need, but it's not really direct funding for this.
Gotcha. So how do they incentivize developers to actually want to build these units?
In Cambridge, the affordable housing overlay did a lot for affordable developers. There's like 4 of them in the city that really operate well. They also kind of have a way of directing community housing funds in their direction. It's magic. But by full deregulation, they were able to build lots of projects at first on their own sites that they already controlled, and then they've expanded a little bit. Mm-hmm. For everyone else, there's no incentive. So I think I get lots of people calling me. I'm not going to say I do a lot of pro bono work, but I do a lot of pro bono work for different smaller developers who are like, how do I make this work? Because as you said before, Cambridge is tough. I like to make it less tough for people because I don't like them that much. Mm-hmm. And what I'm seeing are, if you can make like a 3-unit project that kind of penciled out now to a 5-unit project, and it really is not a bad idea. That's kind of where development is in Cambridge right now. If once you go past the 10-unit threshold, it's really like a bottomless pit until you hit like 200, 300 units. So that entire middle market is just not there.
So you're saying that like it's more effective to build under 10 units, or to build, like you have to build at scale in order to make it profitable. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
And but the problem is it's like a catch-22, because the bigger the project is and the more units that you actually have to build, obviously the bigger the scale the project is and the longer time it's going to take to get from point A to point B.
The longer it'll take you, and it's also the only metric that you're really attacking in the benefit in a scale project is your cost per unit. So, in the study that Cambridge put out, they put $87,000 per unit for development in Cambridge, which is a land basis. There are some projects that can go lower than that. I know of a project right now that's like a 55, 60 range, but the construction cost, the type of construction, and what kind of shops they have to use to build it, and the debt service and the capital that they require to get the project off the ground is that much more, costs that much more, has that much risk. If I can get 5% by putting my money into a savings account, why the hell would I give it to you when your debt yield is showing like 3%, 4%? Like, I wouldn't do it. In 90% of cases, the bank, everyone's pencils down, not going to get funded. Even if the land basis in those cases was 0, the project still wouldn't work, because I'm giving you 20% of my building. And that number really is at the condo level, $275 and lower, and like $2 a foot on the other side, because how they calculate it, Cambridge is even worse, because it's like 80% of AMI, right? That's the maximum threshold. Or I think 50, and if you have if you can make a hardship claim and go down to 40. 30% of my income at that level is all I'm allowed to pay for rent or anything like that. Includes condo fees, electrical bills, you name it. All those things are going up. It's not like I can send Eversource a bill and say, hey, listen, you guys jacked up your rates. I'm getting less rent now because of that. I'd like you to make up the difference. No, that's not how that works. It's all on the chin of the developer. But it also makes it, how you underwrite that? It's a floating number.
Right.
So like in terms of your pro forma to get off the ground, I put it at 0. Because if it's $1 more, happy day, I win. But for other guys, they can't really do that, because they're either acquiring the property or doing some other kind of deal to get the land. They have to show the number, and that number is going to be the lowest possible number it can be, because it has to be. It just makes it virtually impossible in a marketplace where interest rates are 6, 7, 8. Right now, I can go to the universe to get capital at like 12%. Okay, you underwrote your entire housing plan at 4%. Cambridge is even worse, because not only did they at 4% interest rates, they did a 4% cap rate. So a 4% cap rate, for people who don't know what cap rate is, the capitalization rate is a number that real estate D-bags use to basically calculate the value of a building. The lower the cap rate, the higher the value of the building. A 4% cap rate is like, I don't even know what it would, in terms of what kind of building that would be. Like A-class Crystal Castle on the moon, like levels of beauty building. Typically speaking, a building in Cambridge that's stabilized, residential existing, would be at 5% to 5.5%. For hotels, it goes as high as like 7%. For commercial buildings, for a lab, I don't even know right now, maybe 8%, maybe 9%, I don't know. But like certainly not 4%. So to fine tune your ordinance that, it's like running a restaurant. If the price of meat goes up by like a penny, we're going to switch. We're selling hot dogs now, But like same thing for this. If you fine tuned it for a 4% rate environment, the rate goes up to 5%. What do? If cap rates go up, what do you do? But when you're starting at those numbers, and that never existed to begin with, unless you're building a lab. I used to describe it like building I can build you 300 units of housing, but I have to attach 1 million square feet of space shuttle to make it lift off. If I can't do that, it doesn't work. Project I'm working on in Harvard Square right now, same microeconomics compared to Kendall, but using the same sort of principles of attaching commercial uses to residential to offset the loss in the residential.
Right.
Because if I build it just residential, it's a negative number. Imagine I build 80,000 square feet of condo in Harvard Square, and my land basis is like less than 100,000 a unit, and it is still not workable.
It's not profitable.
It's a negative number.
So you have to implement commercial in order to make it. If you can.
In this one zone, I'm using all my powers to make this work, but like not everyone has that benefit. That and it's not that you shouldn't have to do that.
Right.
You should be able to build a project for housing. I like saying things that I think other people don't want to say, but like inclusionary should just go away. It's garbage. It's total garbage. It was always garbage. It was a stupid idea. It was an idea to get people comfortable with the idea of loss of rent control in Cambridge, and it's never really worked as advertised. Never. The better thing that they have done is the affordable housing overlay, and now with this new zoning, we can actually build housing. They should open the door and let us go. And you'll see a positive result. You actually have real examples of that happening. I like to point to Austin as an example where they let it fly. Inclusionary zoning happens to be illegal in the state of Texas. Like,
oh, it is?
Yeah. So I wonder if there's a coincidence.
Yeah.
Like all the places that deregulate, they don't seem to have the same problem we have.
Well, Texas is on the flip side now, though, right? Because you had people come from California into Texas. There was a huge amount of demand, right? And then the builders overbuilt, and now they have a lot of units sitting on the market, right?
When I moved to Maine, I had to sign an affidavit that I wouldn't bring Massachusetts policies their way, which I do. I swear it on a lobster. But like, you run into that problem. I actually think the glut is not a bad problem. Again, like if we were talking about supply and demand economics, like that's. I don't want you to subsidize me. I don't want you to give me favors. I don't want you to give me anything. I want to survive on my own. Let me. So if I go and build too much housing, I guess it's my fault. But I'm not going to come crying to you about it. What I have a problem with is when you tell me to do something and you put your thumb on my head, tie my arm behind my back, and say, make it work. I said, no. And that's what I'm saying in Cambridge in terms of my own project. I don't advise my clients to go down the treacherous path in which I plan to go down, but it needs to be done. And if anything, I get the council to file a policy order. The city manager is supposed to come with some recommendations in June, and then a final report in October. I think we can move the needle on this, but I need a lot of support to do it. But I think I've told the council, like, I don't care what you lower it to, I'm still suing you, because what you're doing is illegal, and it's a taking unless you can show a specific impact. The legal pathway for this was made possible with a case that took place last year, and slowly developers are starting to come to realization that they can actually sue on this. I think they should, but the goal for me is to highlight how Cambridge has really poorly implemented this, and also an apology to every single other state that followed us down this road.
The crazy thing is, if you kind of look on like the outside looking in, I would think that the more restrictions that you put on cities or towns or whatever it may be, the less, like you just talked about, you sometimes consult with other developers. Why would they even attempt to build anything and go through all of these hoops if it's not going to, like, why do all of this if it's not going to be profitable when they could go like from square one to square two over here and build over here and do the same damn thing?
A lot of them move.
That's what I'm saying. I mean, you're discouraging development within the city that you're living in.
But have you talked to a lot of developers?
Yes.
I mean, I think the one unifying thing between us all is we're eternal optimists. We drink our own Kool-Aid before anyone else even gets a shot. Like I believe I can make it work.
I think you could make it work too, if anybody could make it work, because you have the background in construction, but you have the benefit that you're also an attorney, which when you walk in the door, I'm sure that everybody is scared at that fact to some point. I
think they're like, oh my God, here he is again.
Yes.
But like, I've been saying this for a long time, and I've been consistent like the North frickin' Star. Over and over again for 15 plus years, and even when they be before the 20% jump, after the 20% jump, even for the BUTO regulations, for green roof regulations, for embodied carbon regulations, for the net zero regulations, for the specialized stretch code regulations, I've been saying the same thing. You are adding cost to all the things we are doing, and you are achieving not the goals that you say that you're achieving. So if you actually want to achieve the goal of producing housing, you want that housing to be climate ready, net zero, blah, 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 blah. Great. I can put everything under the Christmas tree that you want, but you got to remove this process that's a labyrinth of nonsense. You have to reduce, remove, or subsidize and pay for inclusionary housing. End of story. There's lots of places that do this already, or at least give me an out. They do happen to give outs to larger developers, and because Cambridge is a small town, Biomed was able to buy out of their 25 unit requirement for $5 million. Oh, isn't that nice? I would love to be able to do that. There's other developers who made other deals, and you can track these deals for the larger groups. It's another reason why I think my case is strong, because they've made concessions for all the large developers.
Correct. So it's like
no one else.
Right. So what you're saying is there's proof of concept of other developers that have gotten special treatment or been able to buy this thing out in order to make it work.
Yeah. And make it work, still not at 20%.
Right.
And there's developers now who are in the larger category can't make it work at 11%. Like the case that I kind of alluded to earlier with the lower land cost, that's a real group that's struggling right now to make the ends meet on a project that would deliver 294 units to the city. At
11% affordable? And they still can't make it work?
Correct.
That's crazy.
And their land basis is lower than what the consultants are saying.
And when you mean by, just so people understand, what do you mean by land base?
So what you pay for the land per unit.
Right. And theirs is lower than a lot of other people's is what you're saying. Why can't they make it work? Is it just because?
Cost of capital.
Wow.
Cost of construction.
Yeah.
And what I've encouraged other people to do is to bring to the city what your solution is. I think a lot of the times the city is very flat-footed, saying drone this is our policy. This is our policy. Great. Well, this is what I need to make my project work. Do this, and you'll get housing. To my mind, that at least puts it on the table and puts it on their in their court to say why that shouldn't happen. And a lot of it's just ideological. I think the city itself has just fell in love with the idea that they're a 20% city and that it works, and that I just want more money. Okay. Well, that's we're kind of at an impasse with that kind of logic. You see the housing production, eventually that's where I think there's a little bit more panic than there was before, because lab is dead. Sorry, lab, you're dead, but it's gone. At least for the next cycle, which could last 5 to 7 years. And during these times of commercial downturn, everyone sort of recapitalizes, some get bitten off, and we become something else. Fortunately, Cambridge has a bright light in hard tech. So I think that's where Cambridge is going. But in terms of what fueled their housing drive was all lab. So without that, what do you do? And the answer to my mind is, well, you never were doing 20%. So just, mea culpa, and put together regulations that actually work. I've suggested scaling it, 5%, 8%, 10%, 12%, never 20. But at least a number that gets you something, because I think the catchphrase is, 0% of zero gets you fucking zero, pardon my Italian. Mm-hmm. Sometimes that comes out. But that's a hard pill to swallow. I think, there's one counselor who's a DSA guy, and, no defense to DSA, you're terrible, but I can't live in an ideology. I can't live under your good virtues. That I'm not even sure are really good virtues, because if your good virtues mean that nothing ever happens, and that only under the perfect circumstances of this equity alignment, then I don't even understand you. I don't understand what your goal is, and what you're a lot of times I feel like they support these things because they know it just wrecks it.
Yeah. Do you think that they're just kind of checking a box by having this? That's basically what it is, right?
Yeah. 100%. I don't know what else it could be, because it doesn't actually achieve it.
Because the math behind it. So if I walked in there and I asked them to show me the math where this is beneficial as a whole to the marketplace, they wouldn't be able to do that.
No.
It's an impossibility.
Yeah.
Because the market has only appreciated at great rates. And you know this yourself. What would have happened? I want your opinion on something. If you look at Cambridge back in, let's say, 2018 to 2019 or 2019 to 2020, that market was about to take off.
Right.
It was going to explode, that market. COVID happened. Yep. What would have happened if COVID never happened? What would prices be today? It would be insane. It would be insane. And I've seen a market report that came out that's in draft form, so it's not public information yet. But it looked at the effect of COVID from pre-COVID, post-COVID. What's the result in our squares? We're down 48%. To 32%. Cataclysmic. You would think that if that was your city, fire alarm bells, let's all huddle, let's figure this out. No, we're staying the course. It's almost like go back to the consultant and see if we can get better numbers kind of mentality.
And I'm like, it doesn't have to be that hard, because it wasn't COVID or the pandemic. Some of these things were self-inflicted wounds, and some of these things are just a long time coming. The lab market didn't die because of COVID. Right. The lab market died because the VC money ran out, because the way that whole system works is a little bit bonkers.
Yeah, it's volatile.
And there's other places that are way more deregulated, that can handle it better, that are more cost effective, and capital goes where things yield a better return. We got a little too complacent. I think we're still complacent, and that's part of the problem. I think, if there was ever a time to pivot, now. Pivot to housing. We already have all the labs built. We already have that commercial space. It will find its way. The rest of the city needs to be built out. There was a project at 2072 Mass Ave where they showed this 12-story tower of affordable housing. Two guys I know are building it. They're decent fellas. And everyone's like, oh my God, this is a monstrosity. Oh my God, it's the ugly. You look around and it's like garbage building, brick garbage building that's falling down. I'm like, what are you protecting? And the site used to be a KFC Taco Bell combo, which is the worst there is. It's either you're a KFC or you're a Taco Bell. You can't be both. But what are you protecting? And it's next to a 2-story brick building that is, I think if you and I got a running start, we could probably knock it down. So that's the old Cambridge. And if you're a climate person, you believe the floodwaters are coming. Well, we better not sit. We better build up, right? Or we just sit here waiting for the boats to show up. So there's a lot of intellectual inconsistency on the, and I hate using NIMBY-YIMBY because I think it's just reduces it too much. But on the people who are against seemingly everything, there's an intellectual inconsistency among them about how they approach their problems. They feel like the harder they turn the screws on government, on people, that the better result they get. If they can control it just enough. They're almost like the people who ran the Death Star. They seem to want to control a lot of stuff. But it's just, they don't have the know-how or really any kind of solutions. They're really, I think it's going to this psychological thing about wanting to protect their environment from change, when the city by nature has to change. And if they want any future for their children or their children's children, they need to add places for those people to live and to act and to work. And if everyone's flocking to cities, which they are still, despite COVID, everyone says, the prevailing argument now is because of Trump, we're getting rid of all the foreign students, so don't worry, we won't need to build any more housing. I've actually heard that argument today. And I was like, well, that's pretty sad. I mean, that's also wrong. So once I have opinions about the man, but once this stops, and it will stop, things will be back to normal. And also, things haven't really changed that much to begin with. It's a tough moment, but you don't adjust for the tough moment, just like you don't fine tune a housing policy for the most economically advantageous time of a generation. You plan for something that's sustainable over time. There, I use the word sustainable. They love that word. But it's true. If your policies aren't sustainable like you want to be, then nothing will be. So reduce the inclusionary zoning to a level that actually is workable. Find a legal path for it to work. 'Cause I still think they're on very short legal footing. There's no nexus study. They forgot to do their nexus study, which is kind of crazy. Imagine sitting in a city hall meeting and the mayor's like, so in 2022, you were supposed to do your nexus study, and you're sitting there as the housing director for the city of Cambridge, and you say, I forgot. I would like to think you'd be fired, or at least time out. Did you really rewind the tape? Can we just do it again? Say the right answer, like you were working on, you have it, or you didn't forget. But that's where we are. They forgot. So now we're living in 2016 as far as our nexus study exists, and that's the metrics they're using for development in the city, 2016.
So they're using data from 2016 for future building today.
Yes. Data that says we're at a 4% interest rate, that building's still at a 4 cap, which we learned earlier wasn't even true in 2016, kids. And that construction costs are $250 a foot, $300 for condo. And it also existed in a world where inclusionary had bonuses, and financing was just a very different animal. So none of the things that existed then work now. What's interesting though is their land basis, which is the unit per land. Their number was higher than the assessment used by the consultant they used to get us certified for the MBTA Communities Act, which I'm like, so you're telling me, consultant who will remain nameless, that land got cheaper from 2016 to 2023. Did that happen? I don't think it did. I mean, No, I didn't. So like why didn't anyone like the number that stands out to you the most when you look at the assessment? Why wouldn't you? I would assume that if there's any kind of rigor for certification, that they would have raised their hand and said, "Wait a second, this number is use the right number."
So even when it was, just to sum that up, even when it was originally drafted, it was incorrect.
Correct.
And you're not only are you working off of numbers from 2016, but at the time those numbers were drafted, they were incorrect to begin with.
Correct. Which I think I said at the time, I was like, if I can get a 4-cap for my building, I will sell right now and go live on the moon. That's a great idea. I would love a 4-cap. Who's in? The reality is for existing, it's like 5.5. 5 3/4, depending on the condition of the building, location, because not all Cambridge properties are the same. But like those metrics that like, if I was Milton and I'm suing the state for the MT community, or Marblehead having a big referendum, like I would want to know what, Cambridge got certified. How did they get certified, sir? Can you please show me what they gave you? Because it seems like it's a little bit BS. And if it's BS, why should we comply at all? And I'm not arguing for them to not comply. Although I do think it's ridiculous for Marblehead. I know it's my hometown, so I got a little asterisk there. But like, is Marblehead a transit-oriented community? No, it's like a retirement community of people who sail and drink too much. I don't
know the methodology behind some of these towns, because I was talking to Annie about this the other day, and there was one town that's like 1.5 square miles that's zoned for like 900 or so units, and then you have a town of like Ashby that's like 30 square miles and they're zoned for 40 units.
Right.
So what density study are they doing?
It seems arbitrary.
What is it?
I mean, they threw a dart on a dartboard.
That's what I said. It's like they're spitballing.
But like, if you want to get the most bang for your buck, I think it was in their paper that Marblehead had like a town hall meeting that they had to move it to a different town space because too many people showed up. Like, why do you want to go after a bunch of pissed off boomers? You're never going to build housing there anyway.
Yeah.
Like, it's a waste of energy and time. Milton's a little bit of a different story, but at the same time, Milton, take a note from Cambridge. You can draft your zoning in such a way that apparently it'll be certified, and it's total BS. So go for it. Why fight? Just give them just do what Cambridge did and make it up.
All right. Is there anything? We're at about an hour. Is there anything else you want to add?
I think I said a lot.
Yeah, you did a good job, man. I appreciate you being on today, man.
Thank you for having me.
It was awesome.